My name is Silva Neves. I'm a psychosexual and relationship psychotherapist, and I identify as a gay man and as a queer person. And so I've always loved working with queer people, with being a therapist, because I find that a lot of therapy and the therapy spaces are not always well trained in working with marginalized people, and especially people within the queer communities or the kink communities. So I just decided that I was going to really focus on that, both in my clinical practice, but also with writing about it and doing some advocacy about it, just for people out there to feel like there are spaces for them to go. And unfortunately, not all therapy spaces are safe enough for queer people. But so that's why I'm doing advocacy. It's so that to say to people, hey, there are some therapies that are really, really queer and really, really good, and they will
Mhm.
really understand you.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. How has your own identity, and I know you talked about this a little bit, but how has your own identity shaped the way you approach teaching or speaking on these topics, and even the way you show up as a therapist?
Yeah, I think for me, I show up as a therapist and as a trainer and as a professional, as a supervisor, um, with being human actually, and just really to kind of like almost like decolonize the idea that there is someone that's at the top with all the knowledge and all the wisdom, and the patient or the student is down there not knowing anything. It's this kind of like
Yeah.
really kind of a hierarchy kind of position. And I think that is just really not helpful, especially with queer people, because that replicates the oppression that is happening out there in society. And so the way that I approach it is being human, and I try to really show myself, not really telling my stories to clients, obviously, because the
Yeah.
therapeutic space is for clients, it's not for me. But I do show up as a human, as a professional, of course, but also as a queer human, heart to heart, brain to brain. And I think that's important because we know that the therapeutic relationship is the most important thing.
hmm
And I want my clients and my students and the people that speak with, my colleagues, to really know my positionality, where I come from, and really how I'm going to approach the work um, that is queer affirming based on my positionality. And I think that's really, really important because it just kind of puts the relationship, whether it's a therapeutic relationship or the professional relationship, on a more kind of equal level and honest level and
Yeah.
transparent level. And
hmm
um, and I really, really do not prescribe to the blank canvas therapist, the therapist that says nothing, that doesn't offer feedback about themselves or show
Yeah.
any of their kind of own identities, because again, that can replicate the oppression in society.
Yes, yeah, I love that you connected like how the individual space can just kind of like be a little bit of a microcosm of all the other things, and just like showing up as a human being can be so important, but especially for queer and marginalized folks.
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes, when I talk with clients, I say to them, let's be clear about what you're paying for. I'm in private practice, so my clients pay a fee to see me. And I say, no, you're paying for my qualification, you're paying for my time, you're paying for for me to kind of hold a clinical practice. You're paying me to be a professional. And
hmm
so I'm not going to be like part of your family network or your friendship network. So that's
hmm
a very kind of a special relationship in that way. But you are not paying for the human connection. You are not paying for the care. You're not paying for the presence, because this is always free.
I love that separation. I think that's so important. In terms of experiences that you've had, I'm curious what your most rewarding experience has been while teaching or speaking about LGBTQ plus IA clients or topics.
I think the most rewarding when I speak with queer people or queer clients or queer professionals, it's like they are often telling me, "Thank you for speaking about something that I've always felt and believed, but now I feel like affirmed that what I do and how I work is actually the good way or the right way. There's no right or wrong, but kind of
Yeah.
like I'm doing something good because those things, like for example, showing up with our identities, our positionalities, and not being a blank canvas, is not always affirmed in the profession. And so when queer professionals are saying, thank you for saying this because it affirms that my practice, what I already do in my practice, and it's actually going well, is great. It's great to, be this affirming voice for people and to encourage people to keep doing what they really feel is okay and right to do by their clients, the ethical, right, professional relationship to have.
Yeah. Oh,
And
well,
with the,
no,
yes.
go.
And with the public, I just love when, because I'm on social media, my social media is a professional social media, but of course I'm very openly queer on my social media. And some people say, oh, I really appreciate that you're really like you're a therapist and you're a professional, but also you're really queer. And it really gives me a way forward, a model of how I can be
Yeah.
in queer joy as well. And so that's, if I can inspire people with that, that's like, okay, my work is done. That's just
Mm.
amazing. That's just the best thing. I can't think of anything better to do with my life, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, as I'm young queer therapist myself, even hearing just like you saying this in the interview, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes me feel better, right? Like that's part of the work and so important why we have more people, queer people in these spaces.
Absolutely.
Kind of shifting a little bit, what is a common misconception that you feel like you find yourself addressing often, either about LGBTQ plus community or LGBTQ plus topics?
Wow, there's a lot.
I know. Yeah.
And it really changes through times. I've just seen how the narratives around queer people, LGBTQ people, sexuality in general really shifts. And
Yeah.
at this moment in 2026, we're in a really kind of low ebb of a lot of misinformation, a lot of discrimination around LGBTQ people. This idea that one of the narrative is this idea that if we have LGBTQ representation, it will encourage our children to become queer. And this is just something that I find so
Yeah.
ridiculous, because I grew up, I was born in 79, I grew up in the 80s in France. There was no LGBTQ representation. I was always queer. I was always queer. But being exposed to only heterosexual content did not make me heterosexual.
Yeah.
But what it did, not having any LGBTQ representation, is that I felt all alone. I felt there was no one else like me. And so I felt like bad and wrong and that I shouldn't feel the things I'm feeling. So actually, LGBTQ representation is absolutely important because it's not
Mhm.
making children queer, it's not turning children queer, it's actually making queer children feel like, oh, there are other people like me. It just makes them not feel isolated. And that's just one thing that I really love about this. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
narrative about social media at the moment about, is it good, is it bad? And there's a lot of bad narrative about social media. And sure, social media is not always great. There are some issues with social media, but also social media is a place where queer people who live in rural areas can
Mhm.
actually find their communities, online if it's not in geographical areas. And now
Mhm.
with like a lot of political movements that are becoming more and more anti-LGBTQ, there might be some queer people who live in areas where it's become forbidden even to
Yeah.
name the word LGBTQ or queer or trans or whatever. And so then the online spaces can be a lifeline for them.
Yeah.
So I just don't really like this binary idea of online spaces are good or bad, social media good or bad. Okay, it's maybe a bit of both, but it's good to also understand that for marginalized people, for queer people, social media can be a really important online space. And that
Mhm.
goes further into in terms of like psychosexual work, the narrative about pornography as well. There's like this big narrative about pornography is bad and it's wrong and so on. And sure, there are some pornography that is not so good. There's misogynistic pornography that is pretty not great. But also, there is queer pornography, there is feminist pornography, there is ethical pornography. And that can be really affirming and actually, I believe, a place of well-being for queer people who can actually watch their bodies like them and their sexuality like them affirmed in sexual content.
Yeah.
And I wish there's going to be more and more, I hope there's going to be more and more research on that because the research on pornography is really biased towards let's find out what's wrong. but not so much
Yeah.
about let's find out what could actually be enhancing well-being. And in
Hmm.
my clinical practice, I see that pornography has, for queer people, queer porn for queer people has a really good place for well-being. So those are some of the things that I kind of like, talk about a lot on social media and in my clinical space as well and with colleagues. But and really the idea of diversity in general, sexuality diversity, don't yuck someone else's yum, is kind of like a basic thing. But again,
Hmm.
more and more we're getting into those spaces where people can't hold differences if there is something that they can't relate to, rather than just thinking, well, maybe I'm not turned on by this, or maybe I don't find a specific thing interesting. But I can acknowledge that for someone else world, it's their best thing. Okay, let's
Hmm.
just accept that this is possible, rather than just decided to attack people or shame people or cancel people. This is just not okay. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of things I tend to tend
Yeah.
to do at the
Yeah.
moment in this world that we live in 2026.
I know. Yeah. Well, and I'm speaking of, right, of all these misconceptions and of just like the environment of 2026, how are you navigating teaching all of these topics in such a hostile environment a lot of times?
Yeah, it can be difficult. It depends on the audience. There are some people that, sometimes the audience can relate to it. So if it's a queer audience, an audience that is really understanding about, having thoughts and feelings that are outside of the heteronormative box and the cisnormative box and the mononormative box, then it can be really affirming, and conversations can be really, we can thrive in those conversations.
Yeah.
But sometimes I have audiences, professional audiences, as well as sometimes in the public, where it's more kind of like the very basic things of diversity can be challenging for some people, and it can be met with defense and sometimes with attack.
Yeah.
I do get some emails sometimes from people just deciding that I should burn in hell, or I get emails like that, that I should just die. So, but uh, you just, when I receive those emails, I think, okay, that means that somehow I'm doing something right. Somehow
Mm.
I'm doing something that challenges those dominant narratives. And even some professionals are, sometimes just not thinking, professionals can be attacking as well. We should be self-reflective, but some professionals are just saying, no, let's just trying to find a way to cancel those opinions or whatever. And again, when that happens, it feels like, okay, if I'm rattling the cages, if I'm ruffling the feathers, it
Mhm.
means that there is more to do in this area. And, I'm not on social media or advocating for queer people to be liked by cisgender, heterosexual, monogamous people. I'm out there to um, platform the voices that tends to be silenced. And so, but there are quite a few cisgender, heterosexual, monogamous people that think, oh wow, I never thought this way before. And you know what? Great, fantastic. I'm gonna do a different assessment now, or I'm gonna really pay attention to those things. When that happens, this is like all the hard work and all the attacks are worth it.
Mm.
Or
Yeah.
when I get emails from queer people to say thank you for putting this out there, because it just really, I really related to it and I felt really seen. Again, it's like, as long as I receive those emails, then I keep going, because that makes all of the hard work and all the attacks and all of the haters,
Yeah.
it makes it all worth it.